The reason I agreed to this interview is threefold. Number one, to bring awareness to necrotizing fasciitis. Some people have never heard of it, but have heard of the flesh-eating bacteria, which is, in some cases, one of the same. It's very complex disease. But my mother, I was her caregiver back in 2015 when she was diagnosed with it. The second reason that I'm doing this is to share the strength of my mom that she had through this ordeal. She's one of the strongest people I've ever met based on this experience that she went through, and we as a family, we all went through together. The third reason is there's a lot of support out there that I've seen for necrotizing fasciitis for the patients, and they go through a lot. I cannot imagine. I've never had it myself, but I can't imagine what it's like to have such a debilitating and sometimes crippling disease and deadly disease, where I'm coming from the place of a caregiver. And if there's one person out there that can watch this and say, wow, he gets it, then I've done my job. To give a little bit of background, this was back in 2015 was when things happened, but going back to January, February, early winter of 2014, my dad had been under doctor's care, undergoing 3 hip replacements, surgeries, and he's not some weird three-legged man, but he had 2 hip replacements. After the second one, he got up in the middle of the night and ended up falling, and he was sitting, his bottom was sitting on basically his hip, and throughout this whole time, my mom was his caregiver, and so for that year, I don't care who you are or how strong you are, it wears on you. She had recently, going back to probably November timeframe of 2014, been complaining of pain on her backside. She complained that she had what she called a bump of sorts. That it was painful, and it continued to get worse, and as we got into early 2015, she could barely sit down. One of the times that Dad was hospitalized in early 2015, she actually stayed in my house with me and my wife, and we saw it firsthand. And the spare room that she stayed in was upstairs. She could barely make it up and down the stairs. She ended up going back to her own house, and which brings me to the events that happened that started on March 18th of 2015. Wednesday, March 18th of 2015 is what I called day one. It was one of the strangest days of my life. I had talked to Mom based on asking about Dad, how is he doing, how is she doing, every day for months, and that particular day I hadn't heard from her almost all day long. I mean, she called, texted something at least a few times by noon, and I hadn't heard from her all day, and which was strange. And but where it really turned really strange, my dad was still in a rehab facility at that time, and he called me and he said, Mom wanted me to give you the phone number so you can reach me. And I thought, oh boy, they've given him some kind of a drug or some kind of a medication that's affecting his brain, because I had called the rehab center many times. I clearly knew his cell phone number, but rather than correcting him and telling him, Dad, I know what's going on, I let him tell me the phone number. And when he started, it wasn't his cell phone or the number to the rehab facility. And I said, Dad, where are you? And he said, nobody told you? And I said, told me what, man? And he said they took me to the hospital this morning. It was for unrelated, I'm not going to go into the details, but it was unrelated to the hip replacements that he was going through rehab for. But he was hospitalized that day, and so after talking to him, I decided to call Mom, and it was the strangest conversation I think I had ever had with her. She's a strong woman. I had barely ever in my life seen her cry. When she answered the phone, I said, "Hey, Mom, how are you?" And she said, "You've talked to Annie, haven't you?" Anne's my sister. And I said, "No, what's going on?" She said, "Have you talked to Dad?" And I told her no, I hadn't. And I said, "But I'm talking to you right now. What's going on?" And she was hysterical and going through how she's done the best she can. She's tried hard to take care of my dad, but she just can't do it, and she can't give him the care that he needs, and and then made a comment, maybe I need a doctor myself. I said, "Why? What's going on? What happened?" And she said, "It's just this thing on my backside hurts so bad. All I've done for 3 days is got up, got a glass of orange juice, went back to bed." I said, "You haven't eaten anything?" And she said, "No." And so I got off the phone with her, and I called my sister, because when she said, have you talked to Ann, I called her to find out what she knew. Said, "Pete, that's serious. She hasn't been to the doctor since you were born in 1972. I'm like, "What?" And said, "Keep in touch. Let me know what's going on." And I'm like, "Sure, no problem." I made some phone calls for Mom. She didn't know what doctor to go to, or who to go to, or who accepted her insurance. And so I told her, I said I'd make a few phone calls and I'd call her back. And when I did, I said, "Look," I said, "we could always go to the emergency room. If you think it's that serious, I could go to the emergency room." And she said, "Can I think about it?" And I said, "Mom, no, you can't think about it. I need to know." And she hesitated, but she finally said yes. So I told her I was going to leave work. I left, took care of the dogs so that I could spend proper time with her. When I got to her house, she came out. She insisted she didn't need help. And she came out to the car completely hunched over. She had her wallet, her keys, and a pillow, and walked up to the car in terrible pain. And she told me to take it very slowly. I said, "I'll take it as slow as we need to, Mom. I've got all night." And she said, I don't think I do. We got to the emergency room and checked her in. There were several people there that night, and they explained that they take cases by severity, and it may be a while because there's a lot of people in there, and which obviously we understood. But they sat her down in a chair, took her vitals, and it was within minutes that a nurse came up and called her name, and I said, "Wow, that was fast." And they got a wheelchair, started walking down the hallway, and I looked at the nurse and I said, what's going on? And said, "Your mother's blood pressure is extremely low and her heart rate is really high. That's bad." The doctor finally came in and got things checked out, and he said, "Wow, you've got a pretty nasty abscess on your backside. So we're probably going to have to remove that. So let me get a hold of a surgeon, and we'll get things sorted out." So once we got Mom settled, I told her, I said, "Look, I'm going to go find Dad and let him know that you're here." And she said, "Wait, you make sure you tell him not to worry about me. He's got his own stuff to deal with. So tell him that I'm fine." When I left her room, I started walking down the hallway. It was a dark corridor, and it just hit me. I'm going from one parent to the other parent in a hospital to let each of them know about the other's condition. and I never thought in my life that I'd be in a situation like that. But I got to Dad's room and I told him what was going on. I said, look, I brought Mom in. She's in the emergency room. She's got a pretty nasty abscess on her backside. And he was thankful, said that I've tried to get her to come in several times, and you know, she's stubborn and won't come in. So he said thank you. And he gave me an update on his situation, and I left, and as I was leaving, he said, wait. And I said, yeah, Dad. I said, you tell her, you don't worry about me. She's got enough to worry about. And I'm fine. I'm sorry. I didn't think this was going to happen. I went back and Mom got a room, and I met the doctor and the surgeon, and he said, we're going to get her in as soon as possible, and we're going to take care of this abscess, and she's going to be as good as new. And I said, okay, I can count on that. And she was getting sleepy, so I let her go, and I said, look, I'm going to go home, and I'll be back early in the morning and to check on you. And she said, you go get some sleep, honey. I'll be perfectly fine. I'm in good hands. So that was the end of day one. And day two was when the misery really started. Thursday morning, I got up and started getting ready to go to work. And on my way into work, I was obviously going to stop at the hospital to talk to Mom and see how she was doing. I told my job, I said, I'll be in as soon as I can, but it may be a while. On my way to the hospital, I got a call from the doctor, and he said he was able to take care of the abscess, and he said, but Pete, there was quite a bit of necrotic tissue. And I'm thinking, okay, so an abscess like that probably hardened maybe at places, you know, dead skin, flaky, whatever, and so that's what I'm imagining in my head. And he said, you understand? And I said, yes. I said, I'm actually on my way there now. And he said, good, she'll be very happy to see you. And he said, but Pete, you understand what I'm telling you? Your mother's very sick. I got to the hospital and, you know, checked on her, and you know, she was kind of in and out of sleep, you know, still under, you know, the effects of the drugs and going through the surgery. And by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, her blood pressure plummeted again. She had been transferred to ICU and was getting ready to go in for a second surgery. When the doctor came out that time, said there was quite a bit more necrotic tissue, and that I had to cut quite a bit out this time. It's growing very rapidly. And I said, Doc, what is it? What is this? And he said, it's a condition called necrotizing fasciitis. He explained it to me that day as also the flesh-eating bacteria, and I had heard of it, and I didn't know a lot about it, but I knew it was pretty bad. And I said, what's going on? And I said, you know, how many stitches did it take to close her up? I mean, how many you know, is she closed up? Is she okay? And said, oh, no, she has to heal from the inside. And I thought, oh, okay, great. You know, I mean, it can't be that bad. I mean, if it's not open that much where you have to close it up, then it can't be all that bad. It can't be all that bad. Wow. Later on, I went in and saw her after she was transferred from the recovery back to her room in ICU, and the nurse on duty, I remember him like he's standing right in front of me, and he said, you know, he's taking care of things, and He said, do you have any questions for me? And I said, yeah, man. I said, Doc said she's very sick and she's cut. He's gone through, surgeries and he's cut aggressively and all this is happening. He also says there's no staples or stitches and she has to heal from the inside. And I just don't understand. And he said, here, come here and let me show you. And so I came around the other side of the bed and he pulled her gown to the side. And in her hip area, by her hip bone, I could see right through to the bed sheets. And it was just gone. It was gone. I told him, thank you for helping me understand. Friday came and some family members were coming into town. My other sister, Bev, came in from Pennsylvania, and while she was on her way, we had gotten word that there was more necrotic tissue and more necrosis in Mom's body that was spreading again, and she had another surgery scheduled that afternoon for 2:30. When it was done, we were called into the family consultation room, and Doc said, I got rid of more, but I cut very aggressively today, and to make sure that I got all of it. I had to make sure that I got all of it. And he said, there's something else. There's a tumor that's on her liver. And it's pretty big. And I'm going to need to do a biopsy to just make sure of what it is. And I said, is this another evasive or invasive, another rough surgery? And he said, oh, no, not at all. He said, I can access it bedside from the incisions I've already made. I can get to the tumor and without cutting anything else. He did that, that procedure, and it was going to be a few days before we got the results back, of course. And but later on that evening, I had organized for Dad, who was in another part of the hospital still, to go and see Mom. We got it all set up, and it was probably 8:30 before I was able to go and get him. And my sisters joked around, and they were both in the waiting room at that time, and my wife, several family members were in the waiting room at that time, and they said, Pete, we have determined that you are the one that's going to take him because we can't handle it. And I'm like, how am I supposed to? But I'm the youngest of four, so that's the hand we get dealt sometimes. So at 8:30, I got him and pushed the code on the wall to the ICU and went straight down the hallway, and there's a bend that turns the corner, and as we got about halfway down, she came into sight, and he saw her and he lost it. Quietly, but his shoulder just started shaking uncontrollably, and I just patted him and I said, it's okay, Dad. And I remembered what my wife said on the very first day. She told me when I went to pick up Mom, you're going to have to be really strong. And I said, I know. And she said, I don't think you understand. This is going to be strength like you've never known. And so I don't know where it comes from, but you will find the strength. And I thought of that day, and I don't know what made me so calm that time, but taking my dad, pushing him down the hallway to see my mom in that condition, I don't know how I kept my cool. But he got up there and he just held her hand and said, I love you so much. and I won't be far. And I'll come visit. I'll come visit you as much as I can. And as long as I'm here, I'll come see you. I laid in bed that night, and that was a night that it all hit me. The weight of everything hit me, and I lost it. And it was the first time that I allowed myself to lose that strength. And I guess it's a form of strength to get rid of it, to let it out. But I just thought to myself, I'll be strong again tomorrow, but not tonight. I can't. I can't. Every day that I went into the hospital, I counted, this is day 3, day 4. I would park the car and walk down this long hallway, and day number 6, day 8, day 20, whatever it was at that time. But I walked in day 19, it was a Sunday, Easter Sunday, and Chris and my wife and I went to the hospital, and we went in, and we had called like I did every single morning, whether it was ICU, the general wing, primary care unit, wherever she was, I called to get an update on Mom. It just became my morning routine, just, wake up, shake off the fog and call the nurses station. And on Sunday, when we walked around the corner, she couldn't breathe. She was gasping for every breath and fighting for it. And the doctor came and took a quick look at her, and he pulled me out in the hallway, and he said, "This is it." Today's the day. It was chaos in the hospital. He ordered this person. He's just shouting orders up and down the hallway. And when they came back, he told me, he said, "Look, I've given her a generous dose of morphine and Lasix to take any fluid away from her organs and to get her comfortable." And it's just a waiting game. I got to get my dad here, so I called the transport company, and I got it organized where they brought Dad, and I told him, I said, this is it, Dad. This is the day. I said, I told him what the doctor said. I said, we don't call the shots, somebody else does, but the docs just deal with what they're given, and that's the best they can do. But I got him there, and we waited around, and we got, half the family is sitting in the room while she was sleeping from the morphine comfortably. And it was probably about 2 hours later, the doctor came in and walked over to her and looked at all of us and took her vitals, and he just had a strange look on his face, and took his hand and he shook her and woke her up a little bit, and she opened her eyes, and she kind of smiled, and he said, "How you feeling?" And she just kind of stretched a little bit, and she said, "Hell of a lot better than I was 2 hours ago." So he just looked around. He said, "Like I said, Pete, I don't call the shots. I just deal with what I'm given." And I guess there's no better day than Easter Sunday for something like that to happen. She ended up being in the hospital for 4 weeks. I kept a journal at the time for a couple of reasons. Number one, I had to communicate with my family that was out of state, out of town, and let them know what was going on each day. And second of all, I had to remove that emotion. I had to take what I was hearing from the doctors and the hospitals and to get it out of my heart and put it on paper and get it into my head and make it facts as opposed to an emotion. And it helped tremendously. Over time, I turned that journal, the diary or journal that I kept daily, and turned it into a book called 170 Days. This is not about about selling books or anything else, but I had to get my story out there as a caregiver. I had to get Mom's story of strength out there for others to see if it could help one person. Like I said in the beginning, that I've done my job. I want to get the word out. I want people to know how awful this disease is, and I want people to know just how strong my mom is and the family that I'm a part of. Day 28 was pretty significant for me. On day 28, it was the day that she was being released. The driver, his name was Kit, wonderful man, but Kit grabbed the handles of the wheelchair and pushed her through the doorway. I took a moment to absorb the magnitude of the scene. Mom was sitting upright. My God, she was sitting upright outside of physical therapy. She shifted her weight in her seat, trying to get more comfortable. She reached the end of the G-wing and entered the surgery waiting area. The expression on her face was one of discomfort, but still, she sat straight and proud. She didn't smile. With her head high, she looked around for the first time at this place that I had become so familiar with. Walking next to her, I matched her pride and stood a little stronger myself. I felt like I had gone deaf waiting for the elevator. I heard no sounds around me and took a moment to reflect as we stepped into the elevator. At 71 years old, she entered the hospital with a huge abscess and flesh-eating bacteria. On the morning of March 19th, she had a surgery to remove it and survived. By the afternoon of the same day, her blood pressure dropped, the necrosis had spread, and she was taken to surgery again and survived. 24 hours later, she had her colon rerouted to a colostomy, had more necrotic tissue removed, and survived. She was intubated for 5 days, avoided pneumonia, and survived. On March 20th, her incision was infected. She went into surgery again, and she survived. On March 22nd, during a 5th surgery, she had the last bit of necrosis removed. Necrotizing fasciitis has a 73% mortality rate, and she survived. On Easter Sunday, she had enough fluid around her heart and lungs to shut down both vital organs, but she survived. I'd never been so proud to walk next to another human being as I was that day. The doors opened to the first floor, and I stayed next to her as Kit pushed her into the sunlit lobby of the hospital. I placed my hand on her shoulder and leaned down into her ear. I was with you when you came into this place 27 days ago, and I'm with you as you leave, and I wouldn't have it any other way. She took my hand and placed it on the side of her face as we continued through the front entrance, taking Mom outdoors for the first time in 4 weeks. I don't know where it comes from, but I found the strength. Necrotizing fasciitis is truly a terrible thing. There are support groups for people who have had this crippling disease, but as much as I've looked, there's not much for the caregivers, and that's the place that I'm coming from. If you're a caregiver of these people, just I want you to know that I get it. I understand what you've been through, and I understand what your loved one has been through. Thank you.